The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Big shock. The fall of Michael Baldwin, a tale of betrayal and fear. Michael Baldwin believed he had outsmarted Victor Newman. He had made a daring move, betraying the ruthless titan of Genoa City in a calculated effort to secure his own position of power. For years, Michael had been in the shadow of the great Victor, navigating the treacherous waters of business, family loyalty, and personal ambition. But the moment he turned on Victor, he thought he had gained the upper hand, that his cunning had finally led him to the victory he had longed for. However, what Michael soon learned was that in the world of Victor Newman, there were no winners, only survivors. And in this brutal game of power, Michael was about to experience a fear he could never have anticipated. Victor was not just a businessman, he was a monster. Over the years, Michael had witnessed firsthand how Victor would dispose of anyone who dared to challenge him, betray him, or cross him. There were countless stories of those who had met untimely ends at Victor's hands, stories whispered behind closed doors, and Michael knew that he was no different. The fear that had once been a distant feeling now surged within him, growing stronger with every passing moment. Victor knew that Michael was not just a threat to his business empire. He was a threat to the very core of Victor's dominance, and as far as Victor was concerned, there could be no threat left standing. It was this realization that would seal Michael's fate. Victor had been biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The betrayal stung, but it was also a calculated risk, a way to put Michael in a vulnerable position, to make him realize just how small he truly was in the grand scheme of things. The day came when Victor decided to act, and Michael, in his arrogance and belief that he was untouchable, was about to pay the ultimate price. One night, Michael's world shattered. He was caught off guard, snatched from his own life in a brutal and terrifying manner. His consciousness was slowly slipping away as a damp cloth covered his face, its fumes laced with a powerful anesthetic. The chemical scent overwhelmed him, his vision blurred, and within moments, the world around him faded into darkness. Michael Baldwin, the once proud son of Genoa City, was now completely at the mercy of the very monster he had dared to betray. When he awoke, his head was heavy, his body disoriented, and the familiar surroundings of his office or home were nowhere to be found. His arms were bound, his mouth gagged, and a cold, metallic smell filled the air. Panic surged in his chest as he realized the truth. He was in the trunk of a car, and the car was moving. Michael's mind raced with questions, but there was no clarity, only a sinking feeling that he had made a grave mistake. Why had Victor chosen this moment? Why now? Was it because he had grown complacent? Had he underestimated the depths of Victor's ruthlessness? Michael's mind flashed back to the countless warning signs, the subtle threats, the chilling moments where Victor had let slip the true extent of his power. He had always known that Victor was capable of anything, but to be at the mercy of the man who had built an empire from sheer willpower was a nightmare unlike any other. As Michael lay there, fighting to stay conscious, he tried to piece together his situation. Where was he being taken? What did Victor want from him? The answers eluded him, and with each passing second, the fear grew. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, Lauren Fenmore, Michael's wife, was growing increasingly concerned. She hadn't heard from Michael, and he was always so meticulous about staying in touch, especially after everything that had transpired between them recently. She tried calling him, but there was no answer. Panic began to set in as hours passed without any word. Her intuition told her something was wrong. Deep down, she knew that if Victor was involved, this could be far worse than she had imagined. Lauren's worst fears were confirmed when she discovered the truth. Victor Newman, the very man Michael had betrayed, was behind Michael's disappearance. There was no doubt in her mind. She knew Victor too well to think otherwise. However, the reality of the situation was far from simple. Despite all her suspicions, Lauren had no solid proof to back her claim. There was no evidence, no witnesses, no physical trace linking Victor to Michael's abduction. Without evidence, there was nothing she could do. She couldn't confront Victor directly, and she couldn't go to the police without something concrete to lead the investigation. But Lauren wasn't one to sit idly by, waiting for fate to unfold. Desperation drove her to take action. She contacted the police, reporting Michael's sudden disappearance, but even they were met with the same dilemma. No evidence. They could only investigate so far without a clear trail to follow. It seemed as though Michael's fate was sealed in silence, the shadows of Victor's empire swallowing him whole. Still, Lauren couldn't give up. She spent sleepless nights combing through every possible lead, every connection she could find that might bring her closer to discovering the truth. Her love for Michael and the deep sense of duty to their family fueled her determination, even if it seemed like an impossible task. As the days dragged on, the situation grew darker. Michael's life hung by a thread, and the fear that he would never come home began to weigh heavily on her heart. For Victor, this was all part of the plan. He had never intended for Michael to escape. His decision to eliminate Michael wasn't born out of a momentary surge of anger, it was a cold, calculated move. Victor knew that Michael was dangerous, that he had the potential to rise against him, and in Victor's world, there could be no room for such threats. Michael's fate was sealed the moment he chose betrayal, and now, Victor would ensure that there were no loose ends left to tie up. But even as Victor believed he had one, there was one thing he couldn't account for, the unyielding determination of Lauren, the woman who loved Michael. She wasn't going to let this go, and with every new lead she uncovered, every whisper she heard, the possibility of a breakthrough loomed just out of reach. What she didn't realize was that the investigation was just beginning, and the darkest secrets of Victor Newman were yet to be uncovered. Michael Baldwin's fate hung in the balance, and as Lauren took matters into her own hands, she vowed that she would stop at nothing to bring her husband back. The battle for Michael's life was far from over, and in this game of betrayal and fear, no one, not even Victor, would remain unscathed. The question was no longer about who would win, it was about who would survive. Victor's relentless hold, a battle for power and control. Victor Newman was a man of unshakable will, a businessman who had crafted his empire with cunning and unyielding strength. He was a force of nature in Genoa City, and his presence commanded respect. Whether through fear, admiration, or both. But in the dark corners of his mind, Victor knew something that no one else dared to acknowledge: betrayal, no matter how carefully executed, would come at a cost. And when Michael Baldwin, the man who had been his trusted right hand for so many years, turned on him, Victor knew that his world, his carefully constructed reign, was at risk. Michael had crossed a line, and Victor had no intention of letting him escape the consequences. For Victor, power was everything. His empire, built over decades, was more than just wealth or influence, it was a reflection of his very soul. He had always kept those closest to him under his thumb, and Michael Baldwin was no exception. Michael, who had been by his side for so long, had become indispensable to Victor's operations. He was not merely an employee or an associate. Michael had become a part of Victor's inner circle, a trusted ally who carried out the most delicate tasks with precision. For Michael to betray him now was a personal affront that Victor could not, and would not, tolerate. The magnitude of Michael's treachery hit Victor deeply, but it also ignited a cold fury that had been simmering for years. Victor had built his entire life on trust, or rather, the illusion of trust. He knew that those around him were loyal only as long as they had something to gain, and he had always been one step ahead of them. But Michael's betrayal shattered that delicate illusion. Victor's empire was under threat, not just from outside forces, but from within. Michael, who had been a key figure in Victor's rise to power, now posed the greatest risk. His knowledge of Victor's darkest secrets, his understanding of the inner workings of the Newman enterprises, made Michael a dangerous enemy. Victor could not afford to let Michael go free, nor could he afford to let him live without a clear message being sent. The stakes were too high, and the price for defying Victor too severe. For Michael, the situation was spiraling out of control. He had believed that by turning on Victor, he could carve out a new future for himself. One where he wasn't a pawn in Victor's endless game. But as he lay captive, bound and gagged in the trunk of a car, his mind raced with regrets. He had underestimated Victor. He had believed he was smarter, more capable of manipulating the situation to his advantage. But now, with each passing second in the suffocating darkness, Michael realized that he had made a monumental error. He had let his ambition cloud his judgment, and now, the consequences were far greater than he could have imagined. Victor would not release him, not until Michael agreed to return to his side. This wasn't a simple business transaction for Victor, this was a matter of survival. Victor's strength, his power, had always relied on those who were loyal to him. Michael had been more than loyal, he had been an extension of Victor's will, a reflection of his own ruthless drive. Losing Michael was unthinkable. He could not, and would not, allow his empire to fracture in this way. The damage that would come from Michael's defection would be far-reaching, and Victor knew it. He couldn't afford to lose his most trusted lieutenant, not to betrayal, and certainly not to his own misguided sense of independence. It was in these moments of reflection, as Michael's mind continued to slip in and out of consciousness, that he realized just how trapped he truly was. The pain of his betrayal, the fear of Victor's wrath, gnawed at him. He could only wonder what fate awaited him. Would he be silenced forever, his body discarded like so many others who had crossed Victor Newman? Or would Victor force him into submission, drag him back into his fold, and demand that he once again serve his will? The uncertainty was maddening, but there was no escaping it. Michael was a pawn in Victor's grand scheme, and he had no choice but to play along. Back in Genoa City, the search for Michael had intensified. Lauren, his wife, was frantic. Every moment without news only deepened her dread. She had no idea where Michael was or who might be responsible for his disappearance, but deep down, she knew that it had to be Victor. She knew that Victor had the means, the power, and the ruthlessness to make someone vanish without a trace. But even with all her suspicions, Lauren had no proof, no evidence to link Victor to her husband's abduction. Without solid proof, there was nothing she could do. She was stuck in a web of fear and uncertainty, her heart torn between her love for Michael and her terror of what might be happening to him. Chance Chancellor, the local detective, had taken on the case, but he was no closer to finding Michael than Lauren was. There were no clues, no traces, no witnesses. Victor, as always, had covered his tracks with precision. He had orchestrated Michael's abduction with the meticulous care that only a man like Victor could. Nothing had been left behind. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, not even a hint of where Michael might be. The trail had gone cold, and Chance was at a loss. He had run out of options, and as much as he suspected Victor's involvement, there was nothing to prove it. The police couldn't act on suspicion alone. They needed hard evidence, and Victor had made sure there was none to be found. Victor's ability to remain untouchable was both a source of pride and a terrifying reality for those who sought to take him down. He had spent decades perfecting his methods, ensuring that no one could ever truly challenge him. For all of his enemies, Victor was always one step ahead. His empire was built not just on wealth, but on an intricate network of alliances, secrecy, and fear. He controlled everything, and no one, no matter how powerful they believed themselves to be, could ever truly escape his reach. As Michael lay in captivity, he could only reflect on the choices that had brought him to this point. His past actions, his betrayal, had been driven by a desire for power, for independence, but now they had led him into a nightmare he could not escape. Victor's message was clear: no one could challenge him and live to tell the tale. If Michael wanted to survive, he would have to return to Victor's side, accept his role once again as Victor's most loyal ally, and abandon any illusions of autonomy. For Victor, this was not just about punishment, it was about control. Michael's defection was a direct threat to his authority, and Victor could not afford to show weakness. He needed Michael back in the fold, and he would stop at nothing to make sure that happened. Whether through force, manipulation, or sheer intimidation, Victor would make Michael understand the consequences of his betrayal. The battle between them was far from over. For Michael, the struggle was one of survival, but for Victor, it was a matter of reclaiming his power. The stakes were higher than ever, and the game had only just begun. It was a crisp morning in Genoa City, the air fresh and invigorating, as Audra Charles and Sally Spectra jogged side by side through the park. They had been friends for some time now, but their paths rarely crossed in such a calm and carefree setting. This morning, however, had been different, a moment of reprieve from the constant whirlwind of their lives, full of intrigue, betrayal, and complex relationships. As they slowed to a walk, catching their breath after a vigorous run, they began to talk about more personal matters. Sally, always quick-witted and sharp, was the first to break the silence. Her thoughts turned to Amy, a subject that had been occupying her mind lately. "I'm just hoping Amy can get through this mess," Sally said, her voice tinged with concern. She had always been protective of those close to her, especially when they were caught in the complicated web of Genoa City's social and business circles. Audra nodded, understanding Sally's sentiments. "Yeah, she's been going through a lot lately. But I think she'll be fine," Audra replied, trying to offer reassurance, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. She knew all too well that people like Amy, entangled in the drama of powerful families, often found themselves pulled deeper into situations that were far beyond their control. As they continued their walk, the conversation took a sudden turn toward Holden and Nate. Sally, who had been carefully navigating her relationship with Holden, spoke in a tone of warning. "You know," she said, glancing sideways at Audra, "it might be best if Holden doesn't find out that Nate left town. I think it'll only cause more unnecessary tension." Audra raised an eyebrow, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Why does it feel like everyone is so certain something is going on between you two?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. She wasn't one to make assumptions, but the suspicion was evident in the air. The unspoken tension that seemed to surround Sally whenever Holden or Nate came up in conversation was impossible to ignore. Sally shrugged, her expression turning playful. "Oh, come on. Who's really going to suspect me?" she joked, though there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. She had long grown accustomed to navigating her way through misunderstandings and rumors in Genoa City, but she wasn't always prepared for the judgment of her closest friends. Audra's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "I don't get why Lily has been so persistent with you, though. She's always asking about your relationship with Holden. It's like she's trying to dig for something." Sally sighed, rolling her eyes at the mention of Lily's constant probing. "Lily just doesn't understand," Sally said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for my life. Especially not her." Audra, sensing that this was a sore spot, tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Yeah, but you know Holden, he gives off this feeling that there's more going on between you two than you're letting on." "Even I've noticed that," she said, her tone a bit teasing but also laced with curiosity. Sally's lips curled into a wry smile. "Holden likes to create that kind of tension. He thrives on it. But trust me, we're not some whirlwind romance. It's just complicated. It was in the past, and it's nothing that either of us is looking to revisit." Audra raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Right, so you're telling me it's all in the past now?" she asked, her voice skeptical yet sympathetic. It was obvious that something still lingered between Sally and Holden, even if they were trying to ignore it. Sally sighed, glancing away for a moment as if she were mulling over her words. "It's complicated. But, yes, it's in the past," she said, more firmly this time. "And we both need to move on." Audra wasn't so sure, but she respected Sally's desire for privacy. "I get it. But you know what? You can't keep avoiding the truth forever. It's eating you up inside," she said, her voice softer now, as though trying to reach her friend on a deeper level. Sally gave her a long look before nodding slowly. "Maybe. But we all have our battles to fight, don't we?" she replied, her voice tinged with resignation. They sat down on a nearby bench, the morning sun casting a warm glow on the peaceful surroundings. For a brief moment, the noise of their complicated lives seemed to fade, and they were just two women, talking freely about whatever came to mind. The conversation shifted once again, this time to Billy Abbott and Phyllis Summers, two figures who had been creating their own drama in Genoa City. Audra couldn't help but laugh as she recalled the recent events involving Billy and Phyllis. I have to admit, I'm impressed with Billy. Giving Phyllis an ultimatum? That's bold. I never thought I'd see the day. Sally smirked, her lips curling with a mix of amusement and disbelief. It's about time, honestly. Phyllis needs to understand her place in all of this. She's always stirring the pot, and Billy is finally calling her out on it. I just hope he doesn't back down. Audra's eyes sparkled with approval. I agree. Someone needs to put Phyllis in her place, and Billy is doing just that. I don't know how much longer she can keep pulling the strings the way she has. Sally's gaze darkened slightly as she leaned forward, her voice lower now. I just wish Billy would stop giving her second chances. She doesn't deserve any more of them. He needs to cut ties and move on. Once and for all. Audra, ever the pragmatist, nodded. I see your point, but I think Billy is still holding on to some of the past. It's not that easy to let go, especially when feelings are involved. Sally shook her head, a sharp edge to her words.